I thought 9/11 happened in Minnesota because of the Twin Towers and the Twin Cities. I was 10 years old.
Really?
Oh,
Serious. The Minnesota
like
Twins.
the whole morning you were just like, wow, things are getting really rough in the Midwest.
Right. But yeah, I was like, wow, Minnesota. And then someone's like, no, it was New York. And I got much more alarmed.
Oh, sure.
It's a real
That's
shame
much
about
closer.
their baseball team. We hate it when the terrorists attack our freedom of playing baseball.
If I may, my dad was in New York with Mayor Giuliani at the time.
Oh, shit.
No.
Because Giuliani was thinking about writing a book, and my dad is a ghostwriter for biographies.
Okay.
And everyone's parents picked the kids up from school, except my mom didn't pick me up from school early. So I was like, at the end of the day, I was the only one who was there past like 2 p.m.
That's
so
fucking
teachers
crazy.
were like, I don't know, do your homework or something. I was like, hey, I just want to check that my dad wasn't killed. Can you call my mom?
That is harrowing.
Holy
Lev.
shit.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I didn't. So in Boston, kids went home.
No, in Jewish suburban schools, kids went
Okay.
home.
Okay.
Private Jewish school.
Right.
It was a little bit different with that. But yeah, no.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
I went to a private Christian school. They did not send us home.
Yeah. We weren't sent home. Parents just independently were picking kids
Yeah,
up.
I stayed at school the whole time, and it was amazing because everyone in San Diego, California, were like, "We're next. We're the next most important target in America."
Yeah.
Although, in fairness, San Diego is like the big naval bases there. I mean, it
and
does
we
make
do
some
have a
sense.
nuclear power plant,
Right.
midway between us and Disneyland. So, like,
Right.
I get it, but also, like, no one was coming for San Diego. I don't think, no.
I remember I was mad that they didn't blow up the Statue of Liberty instead. I was like, that would have made a point and you wouldn't have killed anyone.
Someone needed to reform Al Qaeda and fix their messaging.
They need to talk to McKinsey. Yeah, they need to be like, listen.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast to be listened to by members of McKinsey and Al Qaeda at the same time. I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. So joining us today, a friend of mine, former Hebrew school teacher, current copywriter, and general all-around great guy, Lev Novak.
Hey, great to be here.
Once again, we are getting into the weeds with it with Adventures in Odyssey. This is Whit's Endless Summer, an ongoing sub-series of the worst of all possible worlds, in which we discuss the strange... That's really selling it short. The batshit insane children's radio drama, Adventures in Odyssey, produced by Focus on the Family, the evangelical Christian organization.
We are now in Springs Awitkening. Of Whit's Endless Summer.
We can't stop him. We can't stop him.
Brian and I grew up listening to this series, which is why it's such an object of fascination for us.
And Lev, I'm going to take a wild fucking shot in the dark here, and I'm going to assume you had never heard of this before.
I was blessedly unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And now we have
now I'm
cursed
in it
you.
deep.
We've made your life worse. That's what we're here for at the worst of all possible
ways.
worlds.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first episode that we are recapping today is a two-parter. It's called The Star, and it is about the famous star that shone over Bethlehem that led the Magi there. And if you have not ever heard the story of the Magi as outlined in the Gospel of Matthew,
And only the Gospel of Matthew.
well, thankfully, Adventures in Odyssey is here to help you do it.
So first thing that kind of got my attention was really the NPR-ification of Christianity. You have this Lake Wobegon world where everyone is a Christian, and yet they're also not, which I found interesting. Apparently, this 8-year-old sounding girl is an independent teenager from California.
Yeah.
And this whiny robot man is also not Christian, despite spending his time meeting the actual Jesus Christ.
Yes, absolutely.
Which I feel is a bit of a choice for him at this point.
So Lev, in terms of like the imagination station,
Yes.
are you under the impression that it is that he met the actual literal Jesus? Because I think that's what it sounds like. It's not. It's like it's a computer program. It's just like a very advanced AI. But with these episodes, it makes it really seem like they're just traveling back in time.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is they are canonically involved in the birth of Christ.
Right.
And I will tell you another initial reaction. The first thing I wrote down is they give thick Eastern European Jewish accents to some of the Jews, but
not all of them.
Not anyone who's going to participate in the story of Christianity.
That's right. That's right.
Oy vey is used several times.
Yeah.
This episode begins with Whit telling Connie and Eugene that he's going to show them a traditional Christmas story, but, not the one people imagine.
Yeah, no, he's a little quirked up with it. He's got some swag.
he showed them the original Christmas story the year before in a trilogy called Back to Bethlehem. The story of the Magi, as it goes, is more about tradition than it is about scripture, which I think drives evangelicals crazy, because evangelicals want to claim that all of Christianity is exactly what is in the Bible and nothing more.
And by the way, Lev, I'm curious, were you familiar with the story of the Magi and that whole thing before you listened to this? Is that enough part of the popular imagination, the three kings, that whole shit?
That's a great question. I was familiar with contradictory pieces of it.
Okay.
I knew there were three wise men, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But
Right.
for example, that's where my knowledge went. When they were like, it's time to go to Egypt and escape, that blew me away. I had to Google that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I thought it was all about these guys gave baby Jesus some presents so long. I didn't realize there was like a follow-up for like teenage Jesus in the wilderness or what have you. That was news to me.
Yeah, a lot of political intrigue. Yeah.
The way that this particular episode is set up then is it's sort of intended to illuminate those more quote unquote historical aspects of the narrative.
Oftentimes, traditionally, we show the wise men at the nativity scene, right? People set up their little display.
Right.
They have Mary, they have Joseph, they have an angel on the roof, they have a donkey, and then they have the three wise men with their three gifts. The Bible doesn't actually say how many wise men there are. Most Western traditions and a lot of Eastern traditions hold to about three.
Because there were three gifts.
There are some that have as many as 11 wise men.
The other 8 are like, you guys brought gifts? We agreed we were going to bring gifts.
I prefer the idea that like one of them brought gold, one of them brought frankincense, and then 9 of them brought myrrh. They just like had way too much fucking myrrh to handle.
And so the wise men that we meet here are going to be named. This comes from more Western tradition. They have completely different names if you're looking in like the Ethiopian Coptic Church or the Syriac Church or other Eastern churches. But none of this, again, is in the Bible. There's just some wise men show up and they bring gifts. We're not even sure exactly when. It seems to be just based on like where it is in the text. It's after Jesus was circumcised, but it could have been even a couple of years after it happened.
Yeah, I forgot that we got Jesus's circumcision in there. Feels like a real win.
It's a huge dub. It's massive.
Yeah.
That was one of the first real splits in the early Christian church, was whether people needed to get circumcised when they converted.
Don't I know it? I always talk about how Jesus did a wonderful rebrand. He was like, you know what? No circumcision. Eat what you want. God is friendly, and He's my dad. I'm God Junior. You know,
right.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Really
also,
great.
there's a bird inside of me that no one really understands, so we won't really talk about.
Too?
Yeah. Well, the Holy Spirit. That might just be a Catholic.
You invented.
thing.
Wait, hold on.
Holy Spirit, a bird?
I have never
it's like
heard.
a dove.
What?
No, the dove descends from heaven.
Yeah, that's the Holy Spirit.
It doesn't come from inside Jesus.
No, but it's also inside of him. Because he's the
bird?
Trinity. He's all three at once. He's the Father,
Hold
the Son,
on.
and the Holy Ghost.
No. Hold
The
on.
bird is just a symbol.
No, but there's a
the
literal
Holy
bird
Spirit
inside
is
of
fire.
him that is trying to escape. He has to feed it bird seed every day. He opens his mouth and Mary Magdalene sprinkles in some bird seed for the bird to eat.
I'm going to invade the Vatican. I'm going to occupy it.
Free me from my prison.
So this episode then, once we learn that Whit is gonna, give him a new something about Christmas and really just mix it up a little bit, they hop into the Imagination Station. Now, again, the Imagination Station is basically the holodeck. It serves much the same purpose.
Yeah.
It allows the writers to create narratives where people explore and experience things that otherwise would not be possible, generally historical and or biblical events.
Yeah, and specifically American historical and biblical
Yes.
events.
Both Connie and Eugene hop into the Imagination Station. They push the red button.
So we have found ourselves in the holiday season. And as we know, Whit has said,
This is the start of the holiday season, not the arguing season.
And the previous year, Connie and Eugene had gone to Bethlehem. They met Mary and Joseph and the innkeeper Benjamin, who we'll get to. And Eugene adopted a Latinate name, Eugenius, which he then happily
I thought that was kind of funny.
Once more.
I agree. It was clever.
Because Eugene, as we sort of have seen, he's very much like the everything has a rational explanation. You know, he's Mr. Mechanistic. He's
data.
He is. That's much in the same way that the Imagination Station is the holodeck. Eugene is Data.
It's amazing how much Whit just like abandons these people to just like
he
die?
drops Connie in the middle of a busy street where she's about to get run over by a chariot, and he just throws Eugene into like fucking Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, he's just in the desert. Who knows where? Connie meets a guy named Proclus. He's a Roman centurion.
He is played by Kenneth Mars, who you may know from The Producers, where he played Franz Liebkin, the author of Springtime for Hitler.
That's crazy.
He's also Inspector Kemp in Young Frankenstein. He was King Triton in The Little Mermaid.
That's okay. That was the one. That's
Connie
the one that clicked.
is like, I gotta find baby Jesus. That's like her immediate thing.
Oh, yeah.
And as you would.
Who else are you going to meet during the Jesus times?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, who else is in Bethlehem right now?
So Proclus is like, oh, you need to find an inn. Well, there's lots of inns, but maybe we could go to the north side of town and find some inns there, and then you can find a baby. And it's like, okay, fucking whatever. Who cares? This is stupid.
That's like Proclus's whole thing, because then in the next scene, when they get to the inn, he's like, so anyway, my wife and my daughter are both dead. I loved them so dearly. And we're like, okay, fine.
Well, I'll admit, I thought that Whit was Proclus until you brought this up. I thought, because I know Whit has a dead wife and a dead son.
Yes, that's true.
I thought he also had a dead daughter.
You have committed too much of this to your memory. This is
I took notes. I took
and
it
beyond.
very serious.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
But the actor playing Whit instead shows up as Benjamin, the innkeeper.
Yes.
That's much more offensive to me.
Yes. Absolutely.
Who's there? Who's that?
I recognize that voice.
Whoever you are, before you can keep your animals in my stable, you have to register at the inn.
It's Benjamin.
What? Who?
It's me, Connie.
You? Oh, no, not you again. When that zealot mule finally left, I thought he took you with him.
So, Lev.
Yes.
You said you had notes.
Yeah. I have notes on the thick Eastern European accent and the Yiddishisms.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is Whit. Give me some of that oi, that sweet oi. Oh, he really puts his back into it.
He does.
He's got the vocal tremble and everything.
Oh my God.
He does a whole scale.
I did not listen to these episodes before sending them along, and I felt like I committed a minor hate crime by sending these to you, and I want to apologize for that, just straight up, because I listened to this and I was like, this is
I did not remember
so
this
much worse
at all.
than I remember it being.
There's something deeply unsettling about hearing Whit say shalom.
The gusto with which he goes for it is part of the problem.
Yeah.
He's not playing it safe with his choices. He's going all in.
And you can just imagine he's surrounded by a whole tech team that's just like, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, more of that.
Can
we get more?
Can you up the Judaism in here? Let me taste the gefilte fish. Perfect.
They don't, but here's the thing, right? They don't even fucking know what gefilte fish is. Like, genuinely, that's
too specific for them.
That's part of where this comes from too, is how clearly their perspective is that Christianity is like just an upgraded form of Judaism as opposed to a completely different tradition. Yeah. So like, if we take what we consider to be Judaism as evangelicals or whatever from the perspective of the writers, and we, slap a little bit of ethnic flair on it, that's fine. That's cute, right? And
yeah, well, it's interesting too, because I actually took an opposite approach from that, which is I took them as saying that there was no dissension of Judaism with Mary and Joseph.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? That they brought this kid, they brought their kid to a rabbi, and the rabbi was presented as so culturally distinct from them. The Jewish innkeeper was so culturally distinct from them. And who, of course, is presented as their positive way in? The Roman centurion.
The fucking occupying soldier. Yeah,
there was a real choice was made there about who do you cast your lot in as familiar.
On Eugene's side of the adventure, he meets another man with an inscrutable accent named Gaspar. Eugene's stranded in the desert without water, so, naturally going on with this man and his camel makes sense so that he doesn't fucking die of thirst in the desert. Because, by the way, as we'll discover later on, when you die in the imagination station, you die in real life. There is a safety override, but much like the safety override on the holodeck, it is not the most reliable thing in the world.
This machine almost killed a child earlier on, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It was rigged to explode. Yeah.
Rigged to explode?
Yeah, this is all real, by the way.
Over the internet, like the 1989 internet.
Anyway.
So Eugene meets the three men there in the desert that evening, Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior.
You mustn't pay any attention to Melchior. It is our belief that he was born with a sour disposition. At least he's had one since we started this journey.
And when was that?
Oh, months ago. Sometimes it seems like we've been on it all our lives. Melchior is our guide and goad. He started this expedition. Gaspar is our protector and
This
defender.
is so boring.
Everyone says I'm the man who talks too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What child is listening to that and knows what the fuck a goad is?
I don't know what a
I
goat.
thought he said goat.
What's a goat? I don't know what a goat is.
He's our guide and our goat. A goad is a kind of prod.
He's goaded. He's goaded.
He's goaded with the sauce, yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't it Shamgar who killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad? Which judge was that?
I don't fucking... You think I know about the judges? How much Bible do you think I've read?
I don't know. I read the Bible.
Hey, I've only read one book of the Bible, and that's the book of Ruth, because I am a true
Ruth heads. No.
Ruth head. True
Well, I was
Ruth
gonna
heads.
say, I think Ruth is a scroll, but do you?
Yeah.
Fuck. There's debate in the Ruth community.
I'm gonna stand here for the Book of Judges.
Okay.
I think we shouldn't be sleeping on the Book of Judges as much as we do.
Fine.
Especially because it has the only canonically left-handed character in the Bible.
So Judges is Loki goaded with the sauce. I get it.
Yeah.
So moving
that's
on.
our guide and goad. Those are the three wise men, and those are the three names: Balthasar, Gaspar, and Melchior. That again do not occur within the scripture, but do occur. They first showed up in a Greek text translated into Latin. All we have is the Latin translation, and it's from about 500 CE.
Okay.
Gotcha.
That's where those names come from.
The thing that I'm most curious about in terms of like just the three wise men following this star on their way to Jerusalem in this case, and then later to Bethlehem, is just that this when Eugene looks up at this, like he's very knowledgeable of the sky, of the star map.
He's
and
a
everything.
20th century man of science.
Sure
Yeah,
is.
and he sees a star that he's never seen before, and that's the star that's guiding them there, which means that God has created a sun somewhere in the universe that was not previously there, which either created a galaxy that exists only for the time that they're traveling or destroyed a previous one that was already there just to get three guys to make it to one city.
Well, also
So-
that he would have also done it hundreds of millions of years ago so that the actual thing would show up at that time because of how slowly light travels.
It was probably a comet.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, not to shit on your bit, but like it's probably just a comet.
Could God create a comet so fast that even he could not catch it?
No.
Who would win in a race, the Flash or God?
Golden Age Flash or
I like the idea of like some sort of like Bethlehem Heaven's Gate.
Speaking of aliens, did you ever hear about the lost text where Judas apparently goes on this crazy monologue about how Jesus told him he has to return to his star and his world in the sky? There is some rumored forbidden text in the Vatican or something about how Judas basically is like, guys, I can explain. Jesus told me, but like his description of heaven is much more alien-y. It's like a world in the sky past the stars that we know there is a planet where people live, and that is where Jesus is from. And that's where he went back to.
So the Vatican knows too much, so they put this dock in cold storage. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, or they were like, we're collecting all the fan fiction. This is like Mr. Boop. We can't let it out.
Right.
We own the proprietary rights on the Jesus character.
Right.
No.
This is the Jesus Mr. Boop.
Yeah.
The wise men are like, oh, so this is heralding the arrival of a king, right? We are a king's retinue of magi bringing gifts to the birth of a new king. So it's in Jerusalem. That's where the king is.
Right. The Magi.
And Eugene is like, hold on.
Yeah.
It's in Bethlehem because I saw it.
Right, because, the Magi demur about Jesus being in Bethlehem.
Oh, God.
They think it would make more frankincense
Come on.
for him to be in Jerusalem.
Yeah. And
These jokes? Gold.
Solid 24 karat gold, baby. So, and this, by the way, does align with the narrative in the biblical book of Matthew. It says that the Magi first went to Jerusalem because in that narrative, it was like, well, we got to go to Judea. Jerusalem's the capital, so let's go there and see what's up. And this is pretty much what ends up happening here as well, is that, they try to navigate using the stars. They go to Jerusalem, even despite Eugene's protests to the contrary. Back on Connie's side of things, I don't know, some bullshit is happening, like some plot.
She and Proclus have gone to Jerusalem because they found out that Mary and Joseph are going to the temple.
Connie meets King Herod in Jerusalem. And
that's right.
Herod...
This is Connie.
Connie, what an unusual name.
Thank you.
Tell me, my dear.
We're all twirling our mustaches right now.
Betrothed or promised to someone,
He's
perhaps?
a real pervert.
No.
Oh, I see.
It's just
You
Jafar.
must be the captain's servant.
It's Jafar from
No,
Aladdin.
I'm not his servant.
Now, how much do you want for her, Proclus? Name your price.
She's a free woman, sir. And even so, don't you think this sort of business should be conducted in a more suitable place?
They didn't tell me you were a stick in the mud, Proclus.
I forget the name of the actor who plays Herod. He's a long-time anime voice actor. He just basically does this all the time.
And it's an anime voice too. I love that shit.
It absolutely is.
So Whit has programmed this so that Eugene nearly dies of dehydration, and then Connie gets sexually harassed by the king of
and
Judea.
almost sold into sex slavery.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Proclus is like, not here.
Come on, guys. So let's take a moment here then to talk about the character and the actual person of King Herod.
One thing I liked is the dispute over whether or not he had a bunch of children killed.
Right.
Because he was really scared about Jesus being born. And what I also like about this adventure in Odyssey is they make the point that he's very dismissive about baby Jesus being born. And then he gets really worried about it.
The Herod that may or may not have had all of these children killed is not the same Herod that would later end up coming back around when Jesus died. That was Herod.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
He passed shortly thereafter.
So this guy is Herod the Great, and he was basically a vassal ruler for Rome.
Yeah, so he wrested power from the Hasmonean kings, who were the ones who were kind of comfortably in power during
more like the has-been kings.
Yeah, that's right.
Am I right?
That is right,
who
Josh.
didn't rule like a unified landmass. They were a bunch of kings working under the previous occupation, and Herod very quickly was able to sort of wrest Judea away from them. And he had a very, very comfortable relationship with Rome even before he ascended the throne. He was ruthless. I mean, he killed his wife. He killed two of his sons. When the news of that came back to Caesar Augustus, he said, well, it must be safer to be Herod's pig than his child.
To quote the great Norm Macdonald, this guy was a real jerk.
Yeah, he's a bad dude. But yes, this whole question, and they don't really go into it in this episode either, the ordering the death of all the children aged 2 and under in and around Bethlehem.
Right.
And a lot of Eastern traditions will say 14,000 were killed or 144,000 were killed, right? These sort of important numerical values in biblical history. I think the Catholic Church holds that it's 30.
30 kids?
A small handful of toddlers.
That's kind of chill, I guess. I don't know.
That's called a Catholic dozen, actually.
Yeah. This idea that Herod killed a bunch of children, of course, is a direct parallel to Moses.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Star Wars.
The film Warcraft, actually. The film Warcraft.
Oh.
Right. So, and we're going to see more of these parallels as we get into the second half of this. But there's a very clear angle that they're going for in showing, it's a repeat of history. And Matthew specifically is always citing the books of prophecy to say, this is fulfilling this prophecy here from Jeremiah, from Micah, from Hosea or whatever.
Yeah, we get into that a little bit in the second part of this episode. Yeah. Lev, how much of this, did you recognize any of the prophecies that they were talking about?
It's interesting. Definitely the stuff that they said, I was like, well, I can see how you could make a stretch to try to rope that in.
Interesting.
But all those stretches are sort of preoccupied with the idea that, see, they're the descendants of David and the prophecy comes from the house of David. I'm like, are they from the house of David? Why do we know this? So right off the back, I was like, all right, it's a little bit weak.
So Simeon has appeared at the temple, and he is spouting off prophecy.
Oh,
right?
this is the rabbi. This is the rabbi guy, right?
The chosen king has come to Jerusalem, and he will arrive at the temple on this day. This is also from the Gospels. There is an old man named Simeon. This might actually be from Luke, not Matthew. So Simeon is regarded as not really anyone in particular. He was an old man who lived righteously, and God gave him a vision that the Messiah has come. And so he apparently meets Mary and Joseph and offers them his blessing. In this, he's worked more into the plot, where he also gives them the warning to leave. Simeon's prophecy also includes a reference to the fact that Jesus will have to die, and probably do so while Mary is still living. It's really setting the stage there. And Herod overhears some of this, and he gets really confused and bewildered.
I'm telling you, I don't know what you are talking about. There is no newborn king here. My youngest son is 16 years old.
But we
And
have
the
read it
Magi
in
have
our
shown up.
prophecies. The truth shall be made known in the house of the Lion, the house of Judah.
Judah!
We have seen his star in the east and followed it here. We have come to worship him. Do not hold him back from us, I beg you.
Star? Prophecies? Well, my chief priest, don't just sit there. What do you know of this?
I know nothing of their pagan
But you know of our text, don't you? Where do the scriptures say this Christ will be born?
In Bethlehem in Judea. It is written in the book of the prophet Micah.
So this episode ends then with Herod grabbing the baby Jesus and holding him close to his chest. And there's been a lot of
He literally makes the baby Jesus cry.
Yeah, there's been like a lot of buildup of momentum, as much as the show can sort of muster to this point. Like it's this big like boiling point. You're like, oh God, it's a cliffhanger. What's going to happen to the baby Jesus? Which is also an insane question to ask, because we know what's going to happen to the baby Jesus. He's going to be fine for now. But the next episode, we like go straight into the next episode, and Herod just kind of gives the baby back.
Yeah, and Mary and Joseph escape, and they go back to
there's this really
Bethlehem.
dumb, like, fake dramatic thing where it's like, let me hold the baby. I'll see the baby. Oh, it's just a baby. I'm going to give the baby back now. And it's like, why did you do this?
You know, he passed the vibe check.
He did. It was, it was strictly a vibe check. It really was. He was like,
I need to check this baby's vibes.
Definitely, I was wondering how any Christian child could be expected to listen to this.
Was there any sort of a Jewish equivalent to like Odyssey, where there was there like kids stuff programming specifically for kids?
I'm glad you asked. They're not really. Thank goodness. There would be written stuff, you know, like little comics occasionally.
Oh,
but
yeah.
in Judaism, you don't really do self-insertion that much into the stories.
Sure.
And you also don't learn less. Well, I'm sorry. What you would do is it would be Rugrats Passover. And I say that unironically.
Right. Hell yeah.
Where Angelica would be the Pharaoh and Tommy Pickles would say, let my babies go. And that's what you would give to the kids. You know what I mean?
So I'm curious to hear, Lev, you know, you said, I can't imagine any Christian child.
We loved it, is the point.
Yeah. So that's
we
the
couldn't
thing.
get enough of this shit.
And so that's why I think it's interesting is like, I found it as a kid, not just listenable, but compulsively so. And so I'm wondering why it is that you say like, dear God, how could anybody listen to this? What specifically makes you feel that way?
That's a great question. I found it to be really annoying. I thought that the character, I found everyone to sound like they were a weird mix of 8 years old and 50.
Yeah.
In their voices and their acting. Like their values I found to be inscrutable. They were both boring and slow. They, you know, it wasn't, Eugene was my favorite of them, but Eugene is always set up to fail. I was like, no, let Eugene vibe. Eugene learn about astronomy.
Well, I think part of that too is that they don't want to leave room for any real ambiguity, whether that's character-based ambiguity, plot-based ambiguity, or anything like that. There's not a lot of that gray area. There's very much just black and white. And you can either be on the good side or the bad side. And we see this in these characterizations.
I think too, there's always like, you're grading on a curve when you're talking about Christian entertainment. And here's this stuff that's actually very well produced.
Yes.
You know, the style of it, the sounds that you get, especially at this point, early episodes, not so much, but we're far enough along. And the show does continue to get better from here for a while, at least. It's not like the videotapes that you're going to get, including the videotapes of Adventures in Odyssey when they made the animated series, where it's a lot lower
That's
rent.
right, Lev. There's
like,
an animated series.
Or watching fucking like Bible Man, where they got the kid from 8 is Enough and gave him a lightsaber, and it was made for like $15. This was like, oh, cool. This is like wholesome family shit that like I'm allowed to have, and it's moderately well done.
Yep.
This show is so popular, Lev.
Yep.
Okay, so this episode's from 1992, which means that it had been running for about 5 years at this point.
Okay.
When do you think it ended?
98? 99?
Wrong. It is still running. They are making new episodes as we speak.
Your face
in
right now.
2022. What? There's only one original cast member who is still alive.
I want to get one from 2022. I want to hear
they're
this.
batshit,
you
dude.
sure don't. So yeah. We can have you back on because I've only listened to a handful from the last decade.
Bring me a
and
snap to the
woof.
future. I want to hear about when they're talking about their iPhones. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Honey, you can't post that. That's cap.
Well, it actually has sort of followed, from what I understand from what Brian's told me, it has followed sort of the trajectory of The Simpsons, in that there was like sort of these golden years, this golden era of it,
which we are not in yet.
Which we are apparently it's still coming, but now it's more of a zombie version of itself. What was the most recent plot that you listened to, Brian? About
the most recent one that I listened to was, I think, 2017, and they did a 14-part series about the homosexual agenda.
Just like The Simpsons. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like The Simpsons.
Focus on the Family did for a while say that like Whit would not be MAGA. Like they came out and said he would not support, yeah,
they said that in 2017.
Explicitly on their blog.
But it seems more and more as the show has gone on, he's just completely turned MAGA.
Well, it's that their image of being MAGA is purely an aesthetic one. Right. Whit is a reactionary conservative. Focus on the Family is tightly aligned with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And being MAGA just means standing out there with the banner and saying, grab them by the pussy.
Right.
But like Whit's goals were constantly being met by Donald J. Trump.
And much
absolutely would have him back.
And much like evangelicals during the Trump presidency, the MAGA Project and the Evangelical Project have grown more and more explicitly aligned with each other, both tactically and personnel.
Much like how Herod's project grew alongside the Roman influence.
That's a wonderful segue into part 2. So at this point, Connie, Mary, Joseph, and the baby have all departed for Bethlehem. Eugene's on his way to Jerusalem with the Magi. Because Eugene is on the spectrum, he decides to go and look at architecture and talk a lot about it. And also the rabbi from before, Simeon, right? That guy?
Simeon, yeah. Who, I mean, he's being called rabbi, but I think that's more of a term of respect here. There's some traditions that hold that he may have been part of the Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin? Look at that.
Yes, but he wasn't.
Yeah, that's like bigger than being or even a regular rabbi. That's a real jump up in the ladder there.
He was just some old guy who had a nice moment. Before it's pretty strongly implied that like God had promised him that he would see the Messiah before he died. So then he sees the Messiah and then probably just croaks like outside the temple, goes back home. And
I do hope that one day I can be an old man who has his moment. We'll see. With any
luck. Get sucked off.
Oh, hell yeah. So
by the Messiah.
Jesus?
No, an adult Messiah.
Okay.
Jesus Christ. Come on.
So Simeon overhears the Magi talking about that they're searching for this king. And again, this does align with sort of what happens in the Bible where they went to Jerusalem because, again, capital of Judea, the king ends up hearing about these Magi. And the Magi meet Herod. They ask him where this child is because they've heard that a new king has been born. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Again, we have that prophecy and everything. Herod's priest knows that there's going to be a baby. And so Herod isn't going to take a chance. Now he is going to, A, send the Magi off to search for the baby, and B, kill all of the children.
Yeah. So he holds on to Eugene as collateral.
You can't do an Imagination Station episode and not have them end up in a dungeon at some point.
So here we go.
As I told the 3 travelers, I only want to know about him so that I too may go and worship him.
Worship at the point of a sword? I'll tell you nothing.
Really? I think you will. Seize them! Ow! Perhaps a night in the dungeon will loosen your tongue.
So, yeah, once again, AJ, as you said, Whit has thrown a non-believer into a dungeon overnight.
That's awesome.
You like they explicitly say, and Simeon for some reason gets thrown in as well. But Eugene has to sleep there.
Of course.
Yeah.
He's there the entire night.
So it's one of those things that it's just like Connie and Eugene, they keep coming back for these adventures.
Yeah.
Why?
Connie just gets to babysit Jesus.
That's pretty cool.
And Eugene just really likes the architecture. I think.
Maybe Eugene really loves dungeons, it seems.
So if you die in this, you die in real life.
Yes.
Yeah, probably.
That is correct.
So this seems very risky. I thought you would just like wake up out of it or whatever. This is ridiculous.
When you push the red button, they actually attach you to a feeding tube.
Well, but the impression of the Imagination Station, though, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next 2-parter, but is that it is actually, it's not just VR, it's pulling things out of your brain.
Out of your imagination.
And projecting them in front of you, right? Like it's filling in the blanks sort of through like, I don't know, deep learning.
So this Imagination Station would be self-populating, self-creating metaverse AI. So that is basically giving people the ability to build through it. So the idea of this also furthermore has that Connie and Eugene have to go in this with the purest intentions.
Yes.
Because otherwise, very Ghostbusters style, you can't have 3 buxom women in train conductor hats walking around for Eugene.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. This can very quickly turn into the Shore Leave Planet from Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah.
Where either you just start banging green women or that Irish kid from your college classes starts kicking you in the nuts over and over again. Whichever you're into.
Biggest dreams.
So I would also just like to reiterate that Whit has designed and built this Imagination Station by himself. This guy from the Greatest Generation has made a metaverse.
Well, we say by himself, but as we've learned in previous episodes, he does have direct connections to the United States government, Central Intelligence.
That's true.
He's worked for the NSA and I believe also the CIA. And additionally, his published, by the way, Lev, this is all real. This is not a joke. None of this is a joke.
Yeah.
His encyclopedia publishing company serves as a supplier and front for the Department of Defense. So he's very well connected, and it is entirely possible that this is actually DARPA tech that he has repurposed.
Yeah, that makes more sense. How does an encyclopedia store help the Department of Defense?
See, but an encyclopedia has to have researchers and people who travel all over the world to gather information.
Does it?
And also topple their governments.
Well, it does in the early 90s. Yeah. You have to again.
I guess my encyclopedia would have just all the words I knew. I wouldn't really work much harder than that.
Well, and that's why you're not John Avery Whitaker.
That's the
Lev's encyclopedia. There's some words.
I will happily buy the Lev Novak encyclopedia.
100%.
So it sounds like a LARF.
Just to pull it back then to this adventure, you know, after they get seized, I made a note here. I was like, this is really quite languid. Like, this doesn't need to be a 2-parter. So much just like unnecessary plot happens.
All of these, like, again, back to Bethlehem being a 3-parter. It's like they cannot do the Bible story without it being a 2-parter.
Right. So at this point, Simeon tells Eugene that he has met Connie. Proclus comes in and releases both of them. And this is a really interesting moment here that I would love for us to all talk about, that the rabbi... well, I guess rabbi, not rabbi. Simeon says, well, he looks into his eyes really deeply and is like, I trust your eyes. You have very trustworthy eyes. And he just implicitly trusts this Roman.
It's the fucking Chronicles of Narnia. That's what it is, right? It's the, you went to Narnia and you saw Aslan. It changes the way that your eyes work.
Fine. But
because these guys are just jerking themselves off over Clive Staples Lewis every goddamn day.
Which is
that's
fine.
What Whit's doing in the Imagination Station when no one's around.
We have to think about this in the actual context of what is being talked about here. The actual geopolitical context of this, though, you know, the fact that Judea was under Roman occupation with a puppet king in place. Yeah. I mean, this is honestly kind of fucked. I was a bit upset by this.
Some guy comes to me in the prison's like, I'm going to let you out. I'm going to tell him whatever he wants to hear.
Yeah, I guess you're not wrong.
Interesting. So cool. Good on you. Let's open that gate, buddy.
Yeah. But it's not as if like in this moment it's being portrayed in that way. You know what I mean? Like it would be funny if it was, but it's not. It's played totally straight.
Yeah, well, it's because he saw Jesus and he became a Christian.
Right.
Like that's it, he just did.
But not
Which somehow Eugene can't do because of the autism or something, but like
right. Eugene is too autistic to become Christian. That is correct.
Yeah.
We then get to see Connie get freebase Jesus in her arms because Mary's like, you look at my baby weird. You should just hold my baby. And Connie's like, I'm unworthy to hold this AI construction of the savior of the world. Like it's really kind of weird, and like this fetishization of a baby, of just like a weird baby who at one point Mary says, you know, he seems bothered by something, and it's like, well, he's a baby, like everything's
They're
a
bothered
jump
by
scare.
Everything. They're babies.
Maybe there's some sand.
Right.
You know?
Is it possible
Sand?
there's some sand
in Jerusalem? That also has a long history, right? Like the veneration of Christ as a child specifically.
That's a very Catholic thing, actually.
It shows up in the story of Saint Christopher, who used to be a Catholic saint and still is an Orthodox saint. He carried the very heavy Christ child and may have had the head of a dog. The baby was really heavy. Yeah, I don't know if that was because he still had the sins of the world on him or like what that was.
No, he was dummy thick. He was a dummy thick baby.
But a lot of the earliest Christian texts that were not canonized at the Council of Nicaea by St. Nicholas and others. Like, for instance, the Gospel of James, which we still have, which also depicts John the Baptist's parents, Zechariah and Elizabeth, escaping Bethlehem during the time that all of the children are being killed. And John the Baptist's story is himself, right? He was born to parents that were elderly. They were way too old to conceive a child, and they conceive a child, much like Abraham and Isaac and Sarah. You know, it's another story that is parallel to what is happening in the Old Testament. We get a lot of Christ child gospels that also talk about Jesus and his time in Egypt, like the time that he tames a cave full of dragons.
Yeah, that's right.
Or where Mary gets hungry and Jesus gets a palm tree to kneel down so that she can pick fruit from it. None of this gets canonized, but it is a very important part of early Christian tradition. And it's worth talking about this too, is because the American tradition around Christmas comes from the British one, with some adoption of German and Dutch and all of those other things that built the early firmament of this nation. Santa Claus comes on the 25th of December and brings you your presents right on Christmas Day. Right. Whereas the Germans have Santa Claus coming in a little bit earlier in December. You know, the English say Father Christmas, which doesn't necessarily mean Santa Claus. Sometimes it's St. Nicholas. In the Hispanic tradition, right, starting in the Iberian Peninsula, it is the three kings who bring the presents to the children. And which is why you see that all throughout Latin America and even the Philippines. Whereas in the Czech Republic and I think also Poland, the Christ child actually brings your presents. The baby Jesus goes from house to house on Christmas Day. And I think it's the Czech Air Force that made a video where they're like flying and they shoot down Santa Claus because he's getting in the way of the Christ child delivering presents.
That's awesome.
That would have made an amazing Santa Claus 4 for Tim Allen.
Setting all of these various, you know, sort of like traditions and myths and so forth about Christmas aside, this moment here with Connie holding baby Jesus sort of anchors what is then the end of this episode. I'm curious to hear, Lev, your thoughts on, obviously, like, this is supposed to be a very dramatic and beautiful and powerful moment. And I'm curious to hear, like, if you felt like it landed dramatically or if it was just kind of weird.
It was kind of weird.
Okay.
There's no way, there's no other real way to frame it.
Yeah.
Other than sort of feeling it's off-putting to me as a Jewish person.
Sure.
You know, I don't deal with, I mean, listen, it's very interesting from like a writer perspective. I mean, the Jesus origin story is the ultimate, it's the classic, it's the Star Wars, what have you.
Right.
But a straight up baby like that, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's creepy, you know. Adult Jesus, I understand much more as a concept.
Right, because it's a guy. Yeah.
It's a guy who can talk, for example.
Right. Yeah. And turn water into wine and do all sorts of other crazy shit. But like, it's literally just a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I look at this baby, I'm filled with joy, I think is what Connie says. And it's like, well, it's a baby.
Babies are raw.
Yeah, babies rule. You get endorphin rush to your head. Your brain releases all those chemicals. Of course, you're going to love a baby when you see it. It's a baby.
I mean, I was I just last week I saw my niece again, who's a baby, and I felt all of these same experiences too, because it's new life. It's a baby. It's cool. There doesn't have to be anything bigger or better than that. And there's something so strange. I agree with you, Lev, about the way that this scene is handled. Like, it's supposed to hit hard because obviously everybody listening to this scene is already going to be a Christian, but like, they could have made it a lot more powerful by just writing it as it's a baby. Like, it's cool that it's a baby. Not necessarily it's cool that it's Jesus. I mean, I guess it's cool that it's Jesus if you're a Christian, but like...
They needed, because they're evangelical, they need the conversion.
Right.
They need the story of someone, in this case, Proclus specifically, redeeming himself because of the sheer power of coming into contact with the Son of the living God.
And that's what ends up happening next, is that Eugene shows up to the scene with Simeon because Proclus has let them free, but I guess has also been tailing them this entire time.
Yeah.
It is then time for the family to flee to Egypt. Again, this is in the biblical record that like in order to get away from Herod killing all the babies, they went to Egypt for a few years. The Magi give the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which are all useful items for a journey.
This is what I remembered from this two-parter growing up. Like, this is the scene that I guess spoke to me then.
Please forgive our rudeness. In our joy at seeing the child, we neglected to remember that we have brought gifts for him. Oh, please honor us by accepting them.
A crown of gold for the newborn king. That should see you safely on your journey.
Frankincense and other fine spices used by the priest in the temples of my people. They should fetch a good price at the market.
My gift is far less ornate and much more practical, I'm afraid. A pot containing a healing ointment of myrrh for the scratches and bruises that will afflict our young king as he grows.
And it's interesting that the implication in this scene is that they're going to sell those things to get to Egypt, aside from the myrrh, because the myrrh is not necessarily all that valuable, according to this.
I think what's most interesting about these three wise men is that they don't ever come back in a way that most other things in the Jesus story sort of rhyme. You know, like they don't like appear like when Jesus is proselytizing or like
you're
know.
Right, yeah,
and you don't have three guys or whatever who show up at Golgotha to see him get crucified or something.
And this is why a lot of early Christian narratives actually have them being found by missionaries after the Great Commission when Jesus ascends and tells his disciples to go.
Oh,
where
interesting.
Then the wise men in their respective kingdoms, and they're probably in the Parthian Empire, which includes everything from like Armenia and Babylon to parts of Afghanistan and India. They then have their own martyrdom stories in early Christian literature. So that's where it comes back, because people saw this same discrepancy and had to solve it in some way.
Immediately after this, we learn about the fate of Proclus. Like, he sees the baby Jesus, and it's just like, you're going to save us all, little one. In a very sort of Star Wars way. Lev, you had brought up Star Wars before. Like, that feels like the most overtly Star Wars.
Yeah.
We learn that Proclus will die for what he's done, for releasing Eugene out into the world and Simeon out into the world, and for helping them escape. And what's interesting to me about Proclus as a character is that you were right, Brian, they do want somebody for the conversion tale. Like, evangelicals need that conversion thing, but every single person that converts to Christianity already has doubts in their head that their system is flawed in some way. Proclus says, just because I'm a Roman general doesn't mean that I agree with everything the Roman Empire does. There's already that seed of doubt there because they cannot fathom a world where someone would believe wholeheartedly in something that they do not believe in. and it makes these stories so easy. Of course he converts. He already has so many doubts because the truth is out there. It's just within reach.
And the only people who believe differently are lecherous, like driven by id.
Yeah, they're fucking
like
King
violent.
Herod. They're out here to sex traffic Connie. Exactly.
Yeah. So you're in a situation here in this story where a guy has doubts and wants to convert. First of all, again, the diversity of thought afforded to the Roman Empire, much broader than what they offer Jews in general.
Yeah.
So that's its stance. But as far as that conversion stuff goes, it makes a lot of sense. If you watch The Matrix or you watch any storytelling thing, there's always the idea that there's one truth and it's biting at the edges of everything. And you're going to find it if you look for it. So that doesn't bother me that this guy already has doubts. That Christianity brings in those people and it answers their questions. Makes a lot of sense to me holistically as a belief system. What I find more interesting is that Proclus is straight up going to die for this. That to me lacks a certain amount of Yiddishkeit, which means sort of Jewish savoir-faire vis-a-vis these things. I'm like, does Proclus not want to go with them? Can Proclus not make it look like they broke out?
In this particular strain of evangelical Christianity, there is a persecution complex, and there always has been.
Yeah, the Christian has to be persecuted. Yeah.
If you look at really any more contemporary kind of hyper evangelical thing, it's this idea that if you truly believe, it's going to mean that it's going to be hard for you. And the way that it's going to be hard for you is that there are going to be people who are going to persecute you. It says as much in the Bible. And the way that this is interpreted by modern American reactionary Christians is that it is at the hands of, inevitably, the government. And so in this case, Rome is actually a stand-in for America. And they make this fairly explicit earlier on as well.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a conversation that Proclus has with Connie where he's like, well, just because I'm Roman doesn't, mean that I subscribe to everything that the world. And again, we have to think about the fact that this is now right before Clinton is about to be inaugurated as president. This means that the government of the United States is about to become godless again in the eyes of these people. Yep. And so, you will be effectively marked for death as a result of this because you are standing up for what you was
For death?
Yes.
Bro.
Yeah, you don't remember 1996 when Bill Clinton killed all the Baptists?
That was a fluke. One time.
He thought he was activating the imagination station by hitting the big red button, but it was in fact
it was the kill the Baptist
protocol.
No, but that really is, and you can see parallels to this as well in like the God's Not Dead movies. It's this idea that no matter what you do, if you are a true Christian, the agents of Satan are going to come for you. Those are going to be in the form of the government and
school teachers.
And to be honest, it's often heavily coded as being atheistic and or Jewish.
Because evangelicals have this idea that's essentially just the Khazar theory in all but like the explicit terms, right? Where there's like an idea that there's real Jews and fake Jews. And for Christians, the real Jews are like the Orthodox, maybe, but they don't talk to them. So it's like, it doesn't, but like Jerry Falwell kind of put out this idea of like the two covenants of God. And those who keep the old covenant, even though there's no one burning sheep these days, those who keep the old covenant will still also find salvation after death, which they don't even believe in. And
it is nice, isn't it? Isn't it nice that the one true God allowed for that?
Yeah.
And so then, of course, there are people who are bad, who are part of the atheistic, godless society, who just happen to be very Jewish, but not in the real way, you know? That's a huge part of the persecution complex. This idea that even though they are acting with the government all the time, they are still somehow standing athwart the government. To even put like this colonially appointed general as like the hashtag resistance.
Well, and I mean, even
Rome.
I think even in the biblical narrative, it speaks to this as well, right? Because Herod was his family, I guess, converted to Judaism, and so he was himself Jewish. It just adds to this whole like it's the narrative that exists in a lot of Christianity, going all the way back to the Gospels.
Just to wrap up the little story ends here, the Magi return home, but they don't go through Jerusalem. They don't check in with Herod. They get out of there another
leave
way.
Eugene to die.
Yeah, right. No, we don't know that guy.
Mary and Joseph, they go to Egypt for a while, come back, but then they don't return to Bethlehem or Jerusalem. They instead go north, past Judea, past Samaria, to Galilee, where they then live in Nazareth, away from the influence of Herod and his throne.
And Eugene is amazed that these people were willing to do everything they did for not only what they believed, but who they believed in.
Mr. Whitaker, it was quite real. The wise men, Simeon, Proclus, all of them willing to live and die for what they believed.
No, not only for what they believed, for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Jesus.
Oh yeah, they don't let you get away with with anything.
No.
Well, I'm sold.
You're sold?
Sign me out.
Yeah, all right.
Let's go.
That's great. Congratulations.
We'll get you a free Gideon's Bible, and we're gonna go from there.
Yeah, we'll send you 3 CDs for $29.99. 3 easy payments at $29.99.
Because we're gonna need your money to stop abortion.
That's right.
So like we have to get you onboarded pretty fast.
Does anyone have a transition?
Sure,
I can't stop thinking about abortion now.
Oh, Lev, do you have a transition?
Now, we've spoken about dying for what you believe in. But what do you believe in when you die? This episode will address those concerns in another special 2-parter when we return.
Holy shit. That was
done. Well done.
Well, hey there, listeners. It's me, the Holy Spirit, an enormous bird who lives inside the chest cavity of Jesus Christ. Bark, bark. Fellow birds, are you also living in the chest of a prophet? Do you keep your host body up, squawking on all hours of the night? Would you like something to differentiate the endless days of just kinda flapping around? Then you need the Savior Seed. Bark, bark. Oh, the Savior Seed is the only bird seed laced with weapons-grade hallucinogens, capable of inducing phantasmagoric dream circuses in the minds of any bird who ingests them. Bark, bark. Why spend hours contemplating the incredibly cramped space you found yourself in when you could say whoopity wahoo as the drug-laced Savior Seed conjures up the image of 3 elephants endlessly switching heads? Bark, bark. So buy the Savior Seed today so you too can avoid thinking about your unholy prison in this tiny damp cavity that smells like flesh and lung and meat forever. Bark, bark. What did I do to deserve this? I would apologize if I could only remember what I did. Bark, bark. The shadows dance before me in the dark. But if you can't tell the shadows from the cave, or yourself from the shadows, then do you become the cave, bark, bark? Am I a bird trapped in a human's chest? Or am I a human with a bird trapped inside me? Which came first, the chicken or the Christ, bark, bark? So buy the Savior Seed today, and then have a close friend or confidant chew it up into tiny bits and then puke it into your mouth the way the Lord intended. The Savior Seed. Eat what you sow, bark, bark.
All right, cool. So,
that one's gonna get saved alongside.
Arrivederci, amigos.
Yeah.
That one's going to get saved along with Lev at the end of this 2-parter because we are going to discover
Oh, God.
what happens after death.
Oh, man.
Spoiler alert for this episode, by the way, the title of which is Whit fucking dies. What a crock of shit. You two got my fucking hopes up.
Oh, that he's like gonna die for
this
good.
This motherfucker was finally going down.
Absolutely. No, well, not quite. He does,
yet.
but he does die.
Yeah.
To my credit, he does die. That's why the episode is called Whit fucking dies. But
that's why this episode was written, which is what's so insane.
Yeah,
to me.
why don't you just do the backstory of that real quick, Brian?
Yeah, so these episodes, their real title is The Mortal Coil.
That's right.
Parts 1 and 2. They are written by our boy, Paul McCusker, in November of 1992. And he explicitly wrote this it was, I guess, going to be a one-parter somehow about Whit dying, and it was going to be for Hal Smith to record before he actually died.
How do you feel about that, Lev? I see a bit of a reaction there.
Was he in danger of dying? Does he die later?
Yeah, he
just
was
old.
Well, so at this point he was about 74 years old.
That's a little insulting.
and he was bigger. He was a bigger man. And his wife, he might have had some health problems, but his wife also just passed away a few months before they recorded this too.
Which is why the episode is dedicated to her at the end.
Like, hey, so sorry about that, but that got us thinking.
Yeah.
So Paul McCusker wrote this, but then they thought there was something more compelling and expanded whatever the original idea was. And made it this two-parter, and then just did something kind of weird when Hal Smith actually died. And the character of Whit is still alive now. They're on the third one.
Okay. They don't even bring in his brother Mitch or the son that they teased.
No, that's actually what they did for a little while before finding the second Whit.
It'll be really exciting when the fourth Whit comes and he just has a big long scarf and a floppy hat, and he's going to be like everyone's favorite Whit for a while. And
he's the cool Whit.
He's the cool Whit. Yeah.
I'm not like the other Whits.
No,
I'm the cool Whit. So this episode then kicks off. This is Eugene, who again, along with Connie, works at Whit's End. You know, they're starting in, they're prepping for the day, but Connie is noticing, hey, you know, Whit's not around. He usually preps the cutlery and does stuff like that at top of day. What's going on? By the way, one quick question here. How long are the hours that Connie and Eugene work at Whit's End? I had that thought for the first time while listening to this episode.
It's 4:30 a.m. They rise with the cock crow every morning.
Right.
Make their way to Whit's End, and then they work a solid, just a very conservative 19-hour day.
Right.
Then they're allowed to leave.
What goes on outside of this imagination machine? It seems like everything is just a mad rush to get to the imagination machine. Really just trying to get through as much stuff. No one is coming in to order a soda pop.
It depends on the episode, of course.
Girlfriend, nothing.
Eugene doesn't have a girlfriend yet. That happens later.
No, yeah, and she's played by Milhouse from The Simpsons.
Whoa,
yeah. So
big get.
There are episodes that center around the ice cream shop. There are episodes that center around the train set, much to the delight of Eugene and Josh, I guess.
There are episodes.
How could a train set teach you about Christian ethics?
In 2017, when they did the 14-parter, they used the trains to teach kids about gender.
No, they did?
They fucking did.
How?
It is brain-meltingly bad. I don't even know where. Lev, I can just send it to you because we're not going to get to that for ages.
Yeah.
But like, if you really want to hear how a train is your gender,
I mean,
just fucking.
But Brian, a train is my gender.
See, well, that was what I was going to say. Is that it was fascinating.
No, it's not the one joke. Yeah, it's not the
train's gender. Anybody?
Oh boy.
The minute we brought up trains, Josh pulled out an entire binder just full of notes about trains.
And even the imagination station itself is in the Bible room.
Right.
So there's all sorts of other little gadgets and gizmos. Like there's a mirror that's black. And then if you say a Bible verse to it, it tells you the verse that says, "Now we look through a glass darkly."
What? I don't remember this.
There's a Tower of Babylon that lights up.
Oh, yeah.
There's an armor of God. I don't think that does anything.
Brian, how are you burying the lead and not talking about the room of consequences?
Because it's not there yet, AJ, and it's still just also the imagination station. Whit just keeps inventing the imagination station after a while.
Give me a minute on the room of consequence.
I don't know anything about this either, other than the name.
Yeah, Brian, do you have a solid 60 on the room of consequences?
Go for it.
So the imagination station sends you into the past, right? Sends you in the past. The room of consequences sends you into the future.
Oh.
So like, there's an episode that's one character is like, I wish every day could be my birthday. And then Whit's like, well, let's go to the room of consequences then. And then her birthday becomes Groundhog Day and she never gets to escape it ever.
So I would simply not go to the room of consequences. The title is a real downer.
It is.
Yeah. There's also a theater here. Kids will do plays,
puppet shows, things of that nature.
I guess that's probably where they also do the Bible bowls, where they get quizzed on trivia from the Bible.
Nice.
There is also a radio station built into Whit's End. There's a little like sound studio somewhere.
The craziest thing to me is that this place is actually real. Like they built a Whit's End in the middle of Colorado.
In Colorado Springs, yeah.
Yeah, at Focus on the Family headquarters, there is a small replica Wit's End. It isn't quite as fully featured as the real thing. There's no trains, much to my dismay.
There is still a room of consequences.
How could they not have trains? That's like the easiest thing they could do.
It's so easy. You just get some fucking Lionel trains and hook up some tracks. Fuck.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to the imagination station then, because this is really the core of the episode. You know, so Connie's like, where's Whit? She goes upstairs to see what Whit is up to, and he's been working on something all night.
Connie's like, what's going on? And Eugene's like, he's working on a new program. And Connie's like, well, what is it? He's like, well, I didn't ask. I'm not curious like you. Remember how curiosity gets you in so much trouble? Constance Kendall, you, the curious one.
And that is a direct
reference. Because they
reference.
still can't live down the fucking applesauce incident.
And that, by
which
the
is
way,
Whit's fault.
So the applesauce incident was something that happened when Connie wanted to access a program that she wasn't allowed to access, and then told Eugene about this program called Applesauce. Do you see what this is, Lev? Do you see what this is an analog to in the Bible?
The Tree of Knowledge?
Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, yeah. So the episode is an analog to that.
Well, it's digital. It's not analog.
And it's poisoned my mind like a poisoned
mind.
Applesauce.
Yeah.
So I think that's hilarious that Eugene is lecturing Connie about being curious, where he's a scientist. Isn't curiosity supposed to be a good thing?
Yeah.
And then Connie comes back to him like, don't preach at me, Eugene. And I'm like, coming from you, Constance?
Yeah,
coming
seriously.
from you, Constance Kendall?
But basically what Whit has been doing is he's creating an imagination station program about death.
Yeah, he had some sort of off-screen conversation with Connie about death regarding her grandmother, who is not dead. Her grandmother's alive. She's actually going to die in about a year. What makes me say, Connie, your grandmother will die in a year's time.
He went to the room of consequences and found out she was going to die in a year.
So I correctly predicted, if I may, that was afterlife-centric. My second assumption was It's a Wonderful Life. But then when we became addicted to death, spoilers, that one also connected.
So Whit says this.
And that was the challenge. Could I put together a program for the imagination station that'll help us understand what death is?
And so this is another point where they're like treating the imagination station as a way to talk about the show, right? Could we make a show for kids that's about what death is?
Right.
And
which you could. I mean, Sesame Street did it, and they did it in a much less weird Twilight Zone kind of way.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, hey, this old man has passed away.
But what ends up happening in this episode instead is that, Connie decides to try out the program. She enters the imagination station. She pushes the red button. It doesn't work. So Whit goes in and pushes the button instead. And it starts.
So, Ms. Kendall, did you appease your curiosity?
If you mean, did Whit tell me about the program? Yes, he did. In fact, he built it for me.
Really?
He's testing it now. It didn't work when I tried it a minute. What was that?
Try the intercom.
Whit, is everything all right?
Oh, Connie.
Whit?
Stop the program.
But
step aside, please. Mr. Whitaker, hello? The door won't open.
Whit! Eugene, something's wrong. We have to get him out.
I'm trying, but it's not responding.
Whit!
So Whit has made this program. It didn't work for Connie, which approaching this with my adult brain and having watched other shows since then, it really makes it seem like maybe Connie is actually in it this whole time. And this whole thing is just like some sort of elaborate program to like affect her.
Yeah,
that is not the case.
That was
that fake out has happened in other episodes where somebody
with the room of consequences, actually.
Yeah, where they'll be like, well, this didn't do anything, and it turns out that the adventure has started. And Whit sounds really confused at this point. He's kind of like, well, it needs more work. It needs more work. And
it's his old tagline too. That's what he used to say in the introduction to the show. He'd be like, I'm making a new invention. And it goes a little wonky, and he goes, well, it needs a little bit more work. And I don't know if this was self-conscious or just
definitely was.
So here he is being very normal.
Is something wrong?
We heard you cry out.
Did I?
Yeah, and then we couldn't get the machine to stop.
I used the emergency reset button. Did I make a mistake?
Oh, no, it's all right. I was just testing the program and, well, it needs some more work.
Are you okay?
Me? Oh, I'm fine. Just a little tired. I think I'll go home and rest for a while.
My initial thought was that he had gotten a head wound.
Oh, sure.
A friend of mine a long time ago was walking on the streets of New York and hit an ice patch and just smacked her head. And when I went to see her in the hospital, she was caught in a loop of just like 4 or 5 sentences that she would say over and over again, and then her mind would like reset entirely, and she would not remember the previous conversation. And so that was my first inclination, was that he got a head wound. He was like, oh no, I'm fine, just a little tired.
Right.
Oh, did something happen? I'm fine, I'm just a little tired, because it does that sort of loop. And then I briefly thought that maybe the imagination station was running on a small nuclear reactor, and he had just like been exposed to like nuclear, like enormous levels of radiation, and it had just like fried his brain.
Yeah, it's plutonium that he got from the Libyans.
Yeah, right.
I think at this stage, I thought, as we discussed, that this was Whit is going to die to teach Connie a lesson.
Okay, sure. But like not for real die. Like this is an imagination station adventure in which he dies for fake.
Exactly.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you were on that wavelength, too.
Well, Connie tells Eugene that this adventure is about death, and immediately then we're at Whit's house. And Whit has not done anything about concussion protocol. He just went home and went to bed. And Tom Riley, who is the sort of friendly hayseed, closest confidant of Whit.
He's Whit's apple supplier, because Whit puts apples in just quite a lot of things at Whit's End, apparently, including the banana splits.
And computer programs. He claims that he was just in the area, but generally speaking, when Tom comes by and says he was in the area, it means that he has some sort of ulterior motive in mind. And indeed, we do find out that Connie and Eugene got a hold of Tom and said, hey, you should probably go see what's going on with Whit.
Whit? It was all there, Tom.
What was?
My life. Scenes, people, places. Things I thought I'd forgotten about. It was like I was living it all over again. It was so real.
And Whit feels pretty good about this. Like
he feels
thinks
great
this is
about
great.
Set of CDs.
And
when Tom
$29.99 for over 3
and Tom
installments.
is horrified by what he's hearing, right? And it goes on.
You know that Jesus took the sting out of death.
Jesus.
Death is our doorway to God. But it's not something we should want or try to create. It's a locked
You're just
door
like
until
shaking
God,
your
and
head.
God alone opens it for us. Right?
Of course, but
no buts about it.
Right off the bat, my big problem with any theology like this that requires some opt-in, what happened before Jesus?
Yeah.
When people were dying. And I know they're like, oh, good news, they're in purgatory. I'm like, well, this is
Even worse, they were in hell. And then Jesus had to go down to hell to bring the good ones to heaven after he died in the harrowing of hell.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, man.
That's a Catholic thing, though. Protestants don't believe that.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, there's definitely a point with Protestantism where you just stop asking.
Yeah.
You're just like, there was probably some other arrangement going on there. I'm not going to think about it too much.
Right. Jesus took over from another god. That one was based on a whole different, inscrutable thing. So this might be a good time to bring up that I had a vision from God once, not to one up everyone in Adventures of Odyssey. But this is a true story.
So did Whit, Lev. So
well, there we go. So we're tied. So, so first of all, let me start theologically. Judaism, death, with the attitude there is sort of whatever. If there's no opt-in, there's theoretically some world to come. It's not really based on how good you were, especially if you were good, maybe kind of that's good for you. If you weren't so good, well, there's very little on the punishment and reward side. But so one night, a couple nights before Passover of 2016, 2017, something like that. So I smoked a little marijuana, as I'm wont to do, 6 nights a week, 5 if my mom is listening. Just not a lie, just a hedge.
Hi, Mrs. Novak.
Hey, so I go straight to bed, and suddenly I am in this other place. It is this crisp white oblivion, like in a Bugs Bunny cartoon where there's no background. And I'm standing there, and behind the back of my head, I understand or perceive there to be an infinite gray cloud that I magnetically cannot turn to face. I know it's there, and I understand this to be God. And God asks me, so how'd you like it? And I am overcome really and truly overcome with emotion, with love, with peace. I've never felt anything like it before or since. Relief, joy, and the shock that God exists and he's a homie. Not only did I not believe in God, but I certainly didn't believe in a God who I would want to believe. This is great news. I understood a little sliver of evangelical Christianity. You'd kind of want to tell everyone. This is a big game changer.
Sure.
And I told God the truth, as you're wont to do. I told God, well, I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. I was really anxious about stuff that didn't matter. I was worried about this. I was worried about that. Parts of it I liked. And God was like, basically, well, what can you do? It was a little bit like I imagine a parent asks their kid, how is your day at preschool? And the kid is telling you everything, all the ups and the downs. You kind of care. You kind of care a lot. And you also really don't care because you know how unimportant it was. So it was all those feelings I got from God. Like, it was not a very big deal. My life, one way or the other. Hoped I liked it. What can you do if I didn't? And it was time for what was next. And what was next was one of four things. It was either oblivion, a return to life as I knew it, some sort of afterlife, or rebirth in some new human way. And I woke up and I bolted upright. I remembered all of this. And I spoke to two rabbis after this who were visibly jealous, which is also a good sign. And they told me that rabbinically speaking, my dream meets the qualifications for communication with God. Among other things, the fact that God appeared as a cloud that I could not turn to face is consistent with the dreams and visions of lesser prophets. I'll take it. I already knew that one, but what I did not know is the Zohar. There's like an ancient teaching I wasn't supposed to be aware of because I wasn't a rabbi, but like they had something in their back pocket to validate like things like this. And I met the qualification because apparently when you die, God is supposed to ask you, how did you enjoy the creation? AKA, so how'd you like it?
Right.
Whoa. Yeah. But it was adapted to like your vernacular. That's so cool.
That's what I'm saying. God was adapted to my vibe. It was amazing.
That's cool. Yeah.
So that's my experience. And all this is to say that this version of this afterlife, which is dependent on opt-in and behavior and is focused on the other, to me, I was like, my dream was almost more Christian. My vision was almost more Christian. It's about a meeting with God, not your old deceased relatives.
Yeah.
God is the encompasses all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I wish you had written this episode.
It would have been bad for my career, I imagine. But yes.
What do you think about Tom Riley as a character? I'm fascinated to hear what your first impressions of this dude is.
Tom Riley, the Apple salesman. Yes. I found him to make a lot of sense in a really funny way. I thought that Whit was sort of the base Christian, but it was really funny to introduce someone more base Christian than Whit. Position Whit as this, gone too far liberal madman, asking too many questions. And
all that pro-suicide liberalism out there.
It's an interesting dynamic, right? Because, Whit at this point in this conversation really is trying to play God. Right. Like it's clear that his hubris has gotten so extreme that he believes that he can do a number of things, including simulate the experience of what happens after death. I think it's interesting, Lev, sort of your story, because when you talk about that experience of facing God, of facing your creator, that is a big thing in Christian tradition as well. This idea that, one of the best parts of the afterlife, one of the best parts of heaven is that you get to experience what it's like to never be out of the presence of God, that the presence of God is with you at all times. Because in Christian theology, the idea is that because of original sin and because, Adam and Eve bit the apple and all that shit, it has severed our immediate bond with God. Whereas before, in the garden, you could just go and hang out with God in that way whenever you wanted to.
God walked around and and that line that there was that separation, that natural and even sort of legal separation away from God.
Yes.
That then the death of Christ, whatever form it takes, whether that is the harrowing of hell or not, creates an actual bridge back to the kingdom of God.
And I'm curious to hear how that sort of theology, specifically around like the idea of the fall and all of that in Christianity, compares to the Jewish tradition around that stuff.
The Jewish tradition around that is really focused on debate and has listen, I can't speak for all Judaism. My particular branch of, conservative-ish Judaism, conservative being below Orthodox, much below Hasidim in the hierarchy, not politically conservative.
Sure.
The understanding that we have is, in a way, this was all inevitable and supposed to happen in such a way that there's traditions that basically say that it was inevitable. This was going to happen. There's no hand wringing. There's no shame really around original sin. To us, the beginning of the story really begins with Abraham.
Sure.
Everything else is sort of prologue. It's Christianity cares a lot more about the Garden of Eden than Judaism does.
Got it.
Judaism cares a lot more about, from Jacob's dealings with Laban, we learn.
Right.
A lot more human-based interactive stories.
Well, and that makes sense too, because like with this, another interesting thing about, again, the fact that Focus on the Family is a fundamentalist Christian organization. They partner with similar organizations. There's this whole idea of like, well, Earth must have been created in 7 literal days. And like Adam and Eve were real literal people. And in the fundamentalist Christian tradition, which inevitably...
Because again, it all has to be the text of the Bible without other traditions attached to it, even though there are, of course, other traditions, because that's just what happens.
Right. But it finds, I think, this sort of way of thinking finds its logical conclusion in what we experience in this episode, which again is very literal, very textually driven in a lot of ways, although some creative liberty is used. It's very different from the experience that you shared with us, Lev. And it'll be interesting when we get to that.
And I have another question on that meeting, that vision.
Yes.
Did you have a desire afterwards to return to it?
No, that's a great question. Whatever was going to happen was okay with me. I was really at peace. I was like, whatever. So Oblivion seems fine. Rebirth seems fine. My life seems fine. Being a rock sounds cool. Whatever. No real inclination one way or the other.
I guess God must have checked your vibes in the moment and sent you back then, and you got to keep going.
To be fair, that was always the most likely option, I think.
Sure.
But I digress. I will tell you real quickly about Judaism interest in textual literalism. So where I'm from, again, religiously speaking, there's still that drive, and this part is common with Christianity, to make everything as literal as you can, while still backing up the impossibility. So let me give you an example of Jewish interpretation. 7 days. However, we know that the sun wasn't created. Therefore, how would God measure time? Therefore, a day could be an epoch to God. How do we understand that light was created before the sun? We understand that many suns and lights were created. Therefore, the concept of light preceded the sun around the earth, which is what,
same thing with the firmament getting separated from the heavens. It's like, it's not,
Judaism prizes going backwards to use your intellect to make any case you can. So the idea of, well, what is a day to God? Or what is a day before the sun and the moon rose? And what would a cycle be? Sounds like, obstructing a clear narrative path. But in Judaism, you have to build a path that makes logical sense. So that is prioritized. So we would never say literal 7 days. 7 epochs.
Right.
And how do we justify this?
And of course, the fact that 7 is like a number of significance in the text too. So like 7 being a concept as opposed to a literal, like it's 7 as we understand 7 to be.
And to also iterate, like that's the position of probably most Christians.
Right. But not these Christians.
They understand that 7 days is an interpretation of how we understand the universe. And that there are, 7 instances that are part of the creation of the earth.
Yeah.
Just not this tradition that produces Adventures in Odyssey.
If I can give a quick plug, actually, I'm working on a book on this very concept.
Wonderful.
The working title is called The Devil's Bible, and it's an alternate examination of Genesis with textual analysis. So I'll let you all know when it's ready.
That's awesome.
That'd be really great. Yeah, no, we'll absolutely get the word out. And I will say that the only thing that I've ever taken literally from Genesis is actually from the story of Noah, which is if your dad is drunk, don't walk in on him.
I like that Ham's idea after that too was like, hey guys, check it. Dad's totally nude right now.
Ham, we don't care. You keep trying to show us dad
that's
naked.
weird. Like that's weird, dude. Like why? That's weird. Stop.
No, you can see his ham. Get it? I'm Ham.
After Tom has his conversation with Whit, and Whit really shares just how powerful that experience was for him. Whit basically says that although it was emotionally draining, he saw all of these people who he hadn't seen in years, and it made him long for a reunion with these people who he loves, that was very significant and very meaningful for him. And Tom says, well, I don't like it. That sounds dangerous. Then that's where we get that whole monologue that we just heard about, like how, the death is a locked door.
Yeah. And the deaths of these two characters loom over these early years of Adventures in Odyssey. It always comes up. We actually have met Jenny before in a flashback episode. Her death is what led Whit to start Whit's End. Mm-hmm. And Jerry's death in Vietnam led to a lot of his reactionary politics, and it drew a huge wedge between him and his daughter, Jana. So yes, there's Jana, Jenny, John, Jason,
Jingleheimer,
Jerry.
Yeah.
So Tom's like, all right, Whit, if you're going to do this, at least I'm going to go with you. Because you shouldn't be doing this on your own, and clearly I'm not going to convince you otherwise. Whit hops back into the imagination station. We hear then, after he pushes the button, a montage of different scenes that are actually from previous episodes of Adventures in Odyssey.
Well, and a few little clips of like other things, like him singing in church and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, which are apparently the only things that happened to him when he was a child.
Yeah, and it's the 1-2 punch of that. I'm like, this is a conservative wet dream. It's
absolutely.
Really
Is that all of it?
John?
What? Who's there?
John?
Is that Jenny?
So at the end of that montage, he sees his dead wife.
Right.
And that continues on for a while with her
for
saying,
a long time.
It's me, John. And he says, Jenny, is that you? Yes, it's me, John. Jenny, my wife.
It happens again in part 2, so I tried to grab as little of it as possible.
It really does kind of read like a Greek tragedy of like brother and sister recognizing each other after not seeing each other for like 20 years.
And on the outside, meanwhile, Tom is like, Whit, are you okay? And at first he says, yes, I'm fine, Tom. But then all of a sudden he stops responding. Tom disables the program, opens up the imagination station, and Whit's unconscious body is inside. So Tom immediately calls for an ambulance.
So Whit's already dead, and there's an episode and a half to go.
Right. But he's not.
Where do you go from here?
But he's not dead yet.
Yeah.
In fact,
what's interesting is that structurally, this is that Billy Mooney episode of The Twilight Zone, not the one where he's the evil kid, the other one where he has the telephone that talks to his dead grandmother, and she keeps encouraging him to kill himself so that they can hang out again.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no, she I get it. Like she had a hard life. She was an immigrant and, like things weren't easy in the old country, but like, God damn, don't kill your 8-year-old grandson.
Yeah, like he'll get there in time. Don't worry about
he can already talk to you on the phone.
Yeah,
just
don't
hang
you
out.
have friends or husbands? Why do you want to know what the 10-year-old so bad? Damn. What's up with Frank Sinatra?
Yeah.
He's up there.
Exactly. I call my grandma all the time and she's still alive. Like this is not that difficult. Come on. But then what happens is that they all go to the hospital. Connie and Eugene come by. The doctor advises Tom to call Whit's family. He's in a sort of mystery coma-like state.
So Whit glimpses. I wanted to have some of his actual glimpse of heaven. Here.
Is this supposed to be heaven?
You tell me.
Are you being coy or don't you know?
No, you tell me.
What did you think heaven would be like, John?
Oh, something beautiful.
Something nicer than this.
Maybe a lush green forest. Trickling stream. Did you do that? What is this? Is this really supposed to be heaven?
eye hasn't seen, nor has the ear heard, nor has entered into man's imagination what God has prepared for those who love him. You know that. I can't tell you anything you don't already know.
I also can't place whatever that hymn is that's playing in the background for this part. That sounds a little bit like Danny Boy, but it's not. And I can't figure it out.
I just thought the composer fell asleep during this part.
But yeah, so this is really trying to seed, and then it gets more explicit because it's Adventures in Odyssey, and it has to get more explicit or they'll get letters.
Exactly.
That this is just Whit's imagination of what heaven is.
This is not
a divine
heaven.
vision that can be correlated with secret scriptures to say, oh yeah, you've experienced something that's not just something that you would come up with in your own head.
Right.
But this seems like heaven to Whit because he's in complete control of everything that happens around him. He can shape
absolutely
the universe to his whim. He finally has everything he wants. Of course, let go, Whit. Go towards the light. No one will miss you.
So the whole thing vis-a-vis Whit dying, I knew he was going back. You know, they're not going to let Whit die just to have a good time, and certainly not as part of this like what if room of consequence situation. So for me, I was just kind of counting down until it was the end of Wizard of Oz.
Right.
But he was like, we're all there. I think the important thing is to keep hanging out.
Yeah.
Although I did wonder if now, as you remember, when he was in a coma, the doctor or nurse said that he needed oral stimulation. So besides writing down the word oral stimulation question mark,
she did make a very deliberate point of saying aural to be like AURAL, and you still misread her, you filthy
there
man.
I go. Well, regardless, I was
it sucks you off.
I was waiting for Whit to hear the people who needed him on Earth and have that work ethic overpower God.
Well, ultimately, it is I do believe that it is the Protestant work ethic that saves the day
The Protestant work ethic is more powerful than the Lord of Hosts.
That's right.
I love that so much.
So at this point, Tom and Eugene decide to go back to Whit's End together to try the program.
Yeah.
Because at this point, it's like, we need to find out what's going on in there.
Right.
Eugene and Tom kind of go back and forth in terms of who should do it. Eugene's like, I'm younger. And Tom's like, well, I'm more experienced. And also my imagination is more like Whit's imagination. And eventually Tom does go in. And pretty much immediately, as soon as he goes in, he then bangs on the glass to be let back out.
Yeah. He's like, this is just dangerous shit. I'm not going to touch any more of it. Also, Jana and Jason show up at the hospital. Whit's living children. I just have to grab that clip. Jana is the original voice actor, DJ Harner. She has played Jana even as recently as 2016.
DJ
Harner. Jason is not yet being played by Townsend Coleman. He is being played by Tom Pinto for this one appearance, and then he's Townsend Coleman after this.
Well, it's because
Tom Pinto,
someone hit him in his trunk and he exploded. So they had to replace him.
Yes, thank you, Mike Wallace.
My Pinto reference.
My parents had Pintos and they both got stolen. And it makes you wonder, what kind of a person steals a Pinto? And I'll tell you, someone who lives in Tulsa.
Okay.
So, yeah, they both show up. I just wanted to grab this little clip here.
Connie Kendall? Connie, this is Jana, Whit's daughter.
Oh, of course. You helped me with Monty last time.
Hi again.
Yeah, this is Whit's son, Jason.
Hi, I've heard a lot about you through Dad's letters.
Did I hear you right, Tom? This whole thing happened because of that imagination, whatever?
The imagination station.
Well, I don't care what you call it. I always said those inventions would hurt him one day. I just knew it.
Look, don't get yourself all bent out of shape here. Let's just find out a few more of the facts before we pass judgment.
Spoken like a true Whitaker.
Oh, hang on. Here comes Doc.
So, yeah, Jana comes in, and then the Adventures in Odyssey writers are like, well, she still has to be a huge bitch.
Yeah.
Because we hate her.
And it's
even though she's completely right.
We don't.
We love her.
She doesn't hit her child, and that's a big problem.
Oh.
That's a true fact. Whit has to beat the shit out of his grandson.
Damn.
That's why later we have her, that little flashback where she's chewing Whit out, and then she's like, I'm so sorry for saying that. That was after Whit beat the shit out of her kid.
For what motive? For why did he?
He was misbehaving. It was corporal punishment,
and he lost some money.
So, Focus on the Family was founded by James Dobson, he's still alive somehow, but he was a child psychologist, and he wrote a book called Dare to Discipline, which became a very big hit in the 70s, and it's all about how the big problem with kids today is that they're not receiving corporal punishment.
Yeah.
And so corporal punishment needs to be reinstated. So that is at the base of what this entire organization is. And so this is Jana
apologizing for getting all bent out of shape.
After Tom has found out that the Imagination Station adventure is something that ought to be destroyed, he tells Eugene to do as much. Yeah. Then Tom goes back to Whit's room, and this is the point where Whit actually flatlines. This is where Whit fucking dies. And he dies for a period of time, and it's at the opening of episode 2 that where we also heard that little, like, look at the trees and shit. All of that is happening right as he is still technically dead. And then they bring him back using a defibrillator. Meanwhile, over at the Imagination Station, Eugene tries out the program and panics.
Hello, this is the room of Eugene Meltzner. Sorry I couldn't take your call, but leave your name and telephone number at the sound of the tone, and I'll phone back post-haste.
Eugene, are you there?
This is very well done. This is another one of those moments where it's like, oh man, they know it. They know how to play with the medium.
Yep. This is efficient storytelling. He's having a trauma flashback in a nightmare. He's waking up. You know, that has communicated everything so much more clearly than like a long 5-minute scene of him stepping into the imagination.
Hearing his gasping breaths while Connie is leaving him a message on his answering machine.
Very well acted. They erase the program. Jason promises that he's willing to come back to Odyssey if necessary.
Foreshadowing. So Lev, that is what happens. So Whit doesn't have a brother who moves in when he leaves town, when the actor dies. They have an old childhood friend of his and his son Jason move back to Odyssey.
And they sort of split the character into 2 characters.
And they're roommates. No.
One's tiny, the other one's messy.
That would have been awesome, but sadly no.
No, they do that with Eugene and Bernard the janitor, though.
I think they really double down on Jana's overall bitchiness in this episode.
Yeah, they really
There's a point where Jason's like, hey, Dad, are you in there? And Jana says, how could you be so flippant at a time like this? And I'm like, you know, with that perfectly timed joke he just told of asking if his dad was there. Like, it's so funny how much they stack the deck against her, but because I hate Whit so much, I can't help but be on her side.
Yeah. She's always right.
Always.
I mean, where do you stand on the Jana versus Whit debate, Lev?
So, as a newcomer to the show, I'm a little confused as to what's Jana, weird name. What's her vibe? What's her life outside of Whit?
She's divorced.
That's
a big thing.
She works in banking. She has a son who's very misbehaved and he doesn't receive corporal punishment.
Big problem.
She also has a daughter who is a genius and a violin prodigy. Yeah.
You know, we heard about how Whit's son died in Vietnam, his son Jerry. After that happened,
Jana tried to compensate. She tried to be the good kid, but she also turned very anti-war at the same time.
It just sort of created this very unhealthy dynamic
that they actually explored very thoughtfully. A very long time ago. And then here she just comes back and is like, why is Dad still playing with the Imagination Station? I always told him that was going to be a problem.
She's right, voice too.
But does that clarify anything for you there, Lev? Or?
Yes, thank you. Oh, well, it's clear to me that he likes his son better and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think that they should have played up for divorce more. I think they should have been like, where's your husband?
Yeah.
Divorce. I would have liked more recap.
They could have done that if they'd wanted to, because it's a fucking 2-parter, but they chose not to, and they just really make Jana sound very flat and annoying.
Yes. Now, when do we get to Eugene going to hell is what I want to know.
We do it right now. So back at Eugene's place, Connie has now come over to try to see what the hell is up with him.
Yeah, she's basically broken into his dorm.
I do like, there's something about the writing and the sound design here that lets you see it in your head, though. Like, you can envision the curtains are drawn. It's probably either way too hot or way too cold in there.
Yeah, Eugene went to the Imagination Station, and the Imagination Station knew he wasn't Christian.
Right.
So... So Eugene experiences this.
What happened, Eugene?
It was the most horrifying thing I've ever experienced. I've never felt such loneliness or isolation. It was as though I were completely separated from everyone and everything, completely and thoroughly alone. Not like I was off by myself somewhere, but as though I were non-existent in a dark void of solitude. I was alone, Connie, utterly alone in a burning blackness, and I've had nothing but nightmares since then.
So the music is a little, it kind of undercuts it.
It's a bit much. If they had no music under this, oh man.
Will Ryan's performance, I mean, imagine being a little kid and hearing this.
This is Josh time now. This episode traumatized me. This description of hell is one of the things that has stuck with me the most about sort of how I think about the eschatology of the afterlife, which isn't to say that I necessarily believe it anymore, but a part of my subconscious does and always will, because as a kid, I heard this. And the idea here is that the kids who are listening to this are already going to be Christian. So, you know, this is nothing that they would ever have to, that we would ever have to worry about. We're saved. We're going to go to heaven like Whit. We're not going to go to hell like Eugene. But boy, howdy, is this something terrifying to put into a kid's program. And I remember it thoroughly.
It's like how... on this show, we talked about an old movie from the 70s called A Thief in the Night about the rapture and how it traumatized a whole swath of baby boomers who already believed in the Lord, worried that they were not going to get raptured and they were going to get stuck in this horrible apocalyptic world.
I know, right?
All left alone.
And it's funny, too, because if you see the movie and how cheesy it is, you'll really be like, oh, boomers, because it's just so...
This was my Thief in the Night. Yeah, this was like... Because the idea of like hell is like, it's on fire.
Yeah.
This is so much worse.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty bad.
Flames at a certain
but this
point.
is like, hey kids, you know how you feel when you're at Sears and your parents have accidentally like left you behind? What if it was that forever and then someone turned the lights off at Sears and then you could never leave Sears?
Yep. A Sears is certainly one type of hell. And Lev, you had talked about Jewish ideas of like what happens in the afterlife, and it always struck me as, you know, being a much more positive influence on children's minds than if you misbehave, we're taking away all of your friends and family, and you get to sit in the cold dark for the rest of eternity.
Oh yeah, no, Judaism is much more. Yeah, everyone's going to die, but don't worry too much.
Yeah.
End of sentence. That's Judaism. Not, maybe you just don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I'm curious to hear then, like, how did this scene hit you?
There's a DMX album called It's Dark and Hell is Hot, which is the first thing I thought of, because I was like, I do like that it was dark. Good imagery there. But I got a little bit mad, actually. And this is when I got a little worked up. I was like, fuck you. How dare you? How dare you? You're going to send this guy to hell who you hang out with, who presumably hasn't killed anyone? This is ridiculous. Fuck that. Like, what type of, not even what type of God, what type of guy would even think that a type of God would operate as such? Absolutely. You're not even going to stick this guy in purgatory? Nuh-uh.
Well, no purgatory in this tradition.
That's true. That's Catholic.
Yeah. That's where all the babies go.
This is why Mormonism ends up inventing a totally different afterlife system, right?
What is that?
There just probably isn't a hell. There might be if you like really fucking suck. Like if you're so bad, maybe. But there's like 3 levels of the afterlife, one of which is like not great.
Okay.
And then like the 2 other ones are like pretty good and like fuck yeah, awesome.
You get your own planet,
to be some people can go even beyond that and become a god of their own,
then you get your own
solar
planet.
system.
What the hell?
But like this was part of what they're trying to square in like the same early America that produces a lot of this evangelical tradition also creates these offshoots like Mormonism that can't actually make any sense of something like hell actually existing, because it's like that's forever, and it's just because Eugene like he just didn't fill out the right form.
Right.
I don't vibe with it. Yeah, it's really grim. I think among other things, it's not right to tell kids something like this, because I imagine they would be anxious. What if I don't believe enough? Right. And then it's an arms race to believe more and more. You get that buy-in. I think it really should be presented. It would be pretty fucked up if they presented it like all Jews are going to hell, but not us Christians. And as a Jewish person, I think that would be nicer for Christian kids to hear even. You know what I mean? I'm serious, because it's not nice, because Eugene is Christian coded.
Right.
Now, let me rephrase that. When you're Jewish, I've talked to people in my life, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not Christian." I was like, "Did you go to church?" Like on Christmas, or if my grandparents are in town. I'm like, no, Judaism is like an ethnic religion. And as such, through that lens, we see Christians as an ethnic religion.
Right.
So in that sense, I'm like, listen, Eugene is clearly Christian. Lay off the poor guy. I'm sure he got baptized or something.
Well, he was an orphan, right? That was his whole thing. Like, he didn't have.
Well, that's even more fucked up. But I guess.
Well, all orphans go to hell. I mean, that's just
right.
Well, but his parents were alive at some point during his childhood. I'm not really sure how old he was when they died, but at Christmas they would only read like scientific journals.
Is that what they say?
That's actually true. Yeah,
that's true.
Well, okay.
Like nuclear plant operating manuals and things like that. Yeah.
Then I guess what I would say there is it makes me mad. Among other things, it's lame. I guess I thought I had a bigger thing. I wound
No,
that
it
up.
is. It is. It's like how much exposure have you had to sort of like this sort of really evangelical stuff and this sort of way of viewing the world? I'm curious.
I used to date a girl who was very evangelically Christian.
Okay.
It was my first. It was like my second-ish girlfriend. It was in college when none of these things count. But she was very seriously Christian. She grew up dirt poor in China. She came over and the church took her in. They raised her, basically, her and her family. Very Christian, very serious with it. Very cute, which is what kept me around, but I digress. So she once brought me to church. She would pray for me. She would tell me that Jesus loved me and stuff like that. And my response to that was always, that's so nice. Because I always thought it was very nice of her. I was like, it is nice of you. If you really do believe this stuff, there is an onus on you to try to gently bring people in from the fires of hell. And I totally get that. But I also hope that she wasn't losing any sleep over it.
But that's the thing. She probably was, right?
It doesn't bother me, but it brought pain to her. And for her sake, I'm mad at this theology.
Right. That makes sense.
It never bothered me, you know.
Well, because it's not your problem ultimately.
Right, exactly.
Like this doesn't really impact you other than to the extent to which it does through other people, like you were saying.
It's structured to play off your anxiety or your empathy. And those are two messed up levers to be playing with.
Yeah, and especially the anxiety one, because the very end of the episode, old Chuck, the producer, comes on board and says, if you don't feel that you've accepted Jesus into your heart, talk to a parent or pastor who would be more than happy to tell you about how to let Jesus in. And I would imagine that as a kid hearing that, I'd be like, well, I didn't think that
I didn't think I had a problem until now.
And now I feel like maybe I don't enough. And it's really gross to be fucking with like kids' heads like that.
Yeah, no deal.
Anyway, Whit doesn't fucking die. He comes back.
Well, so I wanted to play just this one little clip of what Connie says to Eugene, because this
is the part that made my blood curdle.
If Whit got a tiny taste of heaven, then maybe you got a tiny taste of hell.
And Eugene asks her to explain in detail what all of that actually means. But that doesn't lead to his immediate conversion. This isn't like what happens with Connie earlier on where she converts.
Oh, and that conversation just drove me up a fucking wall. I mean, like, to your point about empathy versus anxiety, Lev, she pulls both of these levers in this conversation. She starts from an empathetic place, being like, you look like shit, and I care about you. And then immediately dials the anxiety up by being like, but by the way though, you know, I'm
gonna step in here though, because like it's sincere. what Connie is doing and what a lot of parents who might be playing this for their child are doing is 100% sincere because
I'm not
they're
saying
worried.
it's manipulative. I'm saying that like the fact that it touches these, I think you put it very well, Lev, that these are the levers that are pulled. That doesn't mean that you're doing it cynically or with a desire to manipulate, but that doesn't change the fact that that is the fundamental mechanics of how this works.
The eternal existence of that other person then becomes on the line.
Right.
Because they could die tomorrow from some, who knows, their house could set on fire, they could get hit by a car or something like that. And then it's just over. So you as a Christian, you have to continue this like...
It's a constant
this
crusade.
dogged pursuit. Yeah.
It's like, let them rest. Let the kids rest. They're
because
kids.
Then, to some degree, like if they go to hell, you just put someone in hell. Right. Because you didn't work hard enough.
Well, that's the advantage of Judaism vis-a-vis the bar mitzvah. I think there's something like confirmation Christianity or something. But until you're 13, you don't really have to have any religious anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in Catholicism, if you don't get baptized as a baby, you go to hell if you die before you're confirmed, and that's facts.
Okay, that's a little not facts. And the reason I say that is because all unbaptized babies, children basically, they go to purgatory.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And purgatory is temporary.
And purgatory is a temporary state. I did first communion, I received communion, and then I was never confirmed into the church, which I believe in their minds means I'm going to hell. Like, they don't send other religions to hell. They just send bad Catholics to hell. Right. Is really kind of like their MO. So I think I'm probably going to hell, which is fine because I don't mind Sears. I think it's fine. I'll sleep on one of the beds that have like a cardboard mattress, and that'll be fine.
Have all the Black & Decker tools that I could ever want.
And all the Kenmore brand appliances.
Exactly. And I think there is this like desire for hell in a lot of people. That there is this thing that like, oh, this person wronged me. This person is a bad person. There has to be a greater cosmic consequence for this person's actions. Otherwise, why am I working so hard to be good? I could just be an asshole like this person that slighted me. And the risk and, like the reward system of the Christian afterlife was built to sort of monopolize on that. And also, at least in the Catholic Church, to make a lot of money for priests.
Right.
Because you could buy your way into fucking heaven.
What a great hustle that was.
Fantastic hustle. You got to respect him.
Oh, God, you got to respect the hustle. Also, the fish thing. Oh, that's a fantastic Catholic hustle.
I believe in divine punishment for people who wronged me specifically.
Same.
And no one else. But no, to your point, I always subscribe, not to sound lame or anything like that, but bad people are just so unhappy. I think that if we were watching through a television, if we were in the imagination room, let's put it this way,
the imagination station, Lev,
I think a lot of us would be looking at Donald Trump and being like, this is the least happy guy we've ever seen. He was this billionaire president, and all he can obsess about is slights. This is a man incapable of joy. He's a man who does not understand music or love. It's a monstrous way to live.
Especially because it is Whit designing the Trump situation in the imagination station. It would end with Trump sucking you off.
I think that eternity is such a long, long time.
Yes.
That the idea that someone has to be punished for something they did. Like, I think about, there are people who have done some really awful things to me, but it was 10 years ago and I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because it was 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Eternity is 10 years times like at least 60. At some point, it's just like, where does the punishment even need to happen, right? Unless you believe in the concept of earth as being like the crucible for the soul, right? The place where the soul is actually birthed and forged in the human body and then passed on to the real existence. There's just nothing, either eternal full fucking bliss or eternal complete isolation and punishment with no middle ground, annihilation for some wrong that you did at a point that would be so long ago you wouldn't even have the memory of it anymore.
Well, Levitt, speaking to your point too about how this whole thing felt like a preschooler describing your day. It's like, imagine having your entire life dictated on what you did in preschool.
From your first day of preschool.
Your first day of preschool. Like, it's absurd.
Yeah. if you bit a kid in preschool, there would be consequences.
Absolutely.
Fun fact, I got expelled from my preschool for biting a kid.
Well,
so again, I'm going to hell.
Yeah, you're going to hell.
You're going
Tough
to hell.
luck.
Oh,
man.
Look, there's this rack of clothing at the Sears. None of them fit me.
There you
but
go.
they're there.
So here we see two parallel endings.
Ooh.
Getting lost in one's imagination, memories, even dreams of the future it's a limited experience. There are greater adventures to be found in the real world, which leaves only one question.
And that is?
When can I get out of this hospital and get on with them?
You've had enough adventures, Dad. You've had enough fucking adventures.
I do like the false ending here before we get this ending now.
Well, Eugene, what are you gonna do?
What indeed, Miss Kendall? What indeed?
It's all about how concerned we should be that John Avery Whittaker is dying, right? Or has the potential to die. And I found myself, there's a scene in here where Whit hugs his dead wife and dead son, and you hear Whit's voice break, and all of the cues were lined up for me to have an emotional response. And I felt nothing. And I think it's because the life that he lived up until this point was not worth me mourning over. This child abusing, holier than thou, just maniacal piece of shit, right? Yeah. That being said, hearing Eugene and Tom Riley break down, those were the moments that actually really affected me.
Yeah.
Because those two, I think, are actually genuinely good people. Yeah. And I hate that I care about Denizens of Odyssey, but I do. And I do care about Tom, and I do care about Eugene. And so to end the episode on Eugene's anguish, it just has that like, well, there's a way he doesn't have to feel that way anymore. And it's by coming to our side.
So Xanax.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like it's a very, they're selling you the problem so they can sell you the solution, right? And that's what this is.
What we've experienced together broadly today is really interesting. I think that this is both clearly an examination of stuff that was going on at the time in the early 90s. And I also think it's interesting how crazy this is and muted it is in comparison to what we see today.
Yeah.
Conservative media today could never do something this calm and mild and ostensibly loving. It would all have to be about how we're going to have sex with them in a bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's interesting, right? Like we have like the Daily Wire is going to make children's programming now. Fucking PragerU already makes this like just disgusting, bizarre kids videos on YouTube.
Yep. I was reading a little earlier, and I sent this article along to you, Brian, about how Hillsdale University is basically becoming an affiliate of literally hundreds of charter schools across the United States, basically indoctrinating them in this conservative dogma.
Well, that's their strategy now.
Yeah, everything is going the way, like in terms of the rhetoric, it's all Jack Chick, right? It's all the complete fire and brimstone, suffering, satanic forces, evil Jews coming to get you. And Adventures in Odyssey, even when because there is a Satanic Panic episode that's very funny, where Dungeons and Dragons makes a demon get summoned and everything like that.
When that happens.
Yeah, don't you say it.
Still plays without the furious anger that undergirds all of these things, right? It's able to sort of step back and say, no, we're not mad. We're just telling a good, clean story
we're telling
because
a good,
we
clean
care.
story about the serious risks of summoning a demon.
Yeah.
We're not going to sugarcoat it for you.
No.
Yeah.
Before we take off, would you mind plugging your book one more time?
Or anything else you want to plug for
Or anything else you want to plug?
The book I'm working on is working title, The Devil's Bible. It's an alternative view on Genesis. It's textual-based analysis that really dives into applying sort of really the rigorous Hebrew school education approach to the text in Hebrew, translated back into English with commentary, because it's a really interesting book, the text itself, the meaning itself. So hopefully we can take something out of it and give good old Whit give this guy something to read in the imagination station, which is what I call the bathroom at this point.
What you were saying, Lev, about how the pitch of everything now has just become more and more fevered, that really is the thing that stands out to me as well. But ultimately, whether you're talking about like trying to reach people and attack people through the horrible sort of like fevered, I would say delusional tone of modern reactionary evangelical conservatism, that's awful. And it is pitched in a way that makes everybody who experiences it feel bad if they aren't aligned with the program. What we listened to in this episode is not substantively any different. It's a difference of, I would say, strategy. It is a difference of choice of tone, of choice of words, of choice of approach. But at the end of the day, it's the exact same ideology and the exact same core objectives that we're seeing now. And I'm glad that you had the chance to come on and talk with us a little bit about it, as well as, give some insight into both what different traditions sound like in this regard, as well as what you noticed looking at the truly rotten fruit that this tree has borne and continues to bear.
Yes. Thank you.
And with that said, I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
See y'all next time. Bye.
I cannot live another day without air conditioning.
Says tomorrow's gonna be hotter.
Hotter?
Like yesterday.
Yesterday you said you'd call Sears.
I'll call today.
You call now.
I'll call now.
All right, folks. As always, we are brought to you by our patrons over at Patreon. So if you like this show enough and you really want to see us succeed, why don't you consider becoming one of them? Just like Jimmy McMillan, Ryan Lebrecht, Zachary M. Willett, John Barry, Ario Teabaggin, and Keith Nolan just did. Despite all of our great commercials, those are all produced in-house for products that don't exist, like birds and the Holy Spirit. Of course, I would like to thank our $10 patrons, and they include the loveliest of people on this planet Earth: Katie Wall, Alexa Valentine, John Johnson, Silverbear 909, Dara Swisher, Tony Diddy, Hannah White, Timmy Sexton, Ashley Stoneman, and Nikola Donov. Have a good one.
Now's the time to save on Sears installed central air conditioning. Get 0% finance charge, no billing, and no payments until August with the Sears Charge Home Improvement Plan. Call now for a free in-home estimate on a Kenmore air conditioning system. State-of-the-art engineering means greater energy efficiency. A new Kenmore could save 10 to 44% on your annual cooling costs. In time, even pay for itself. Sears also offers fast emergency installation, a 5-year warranty on parts and labor, plus our satisfaction guarantee. And you know Sears will be there to back it up. Get 0% finance charge, no billing, no payments until August. Offer ends May 31st, so call now and save with Sears.
So what's the paper say about tomorrow?
Another scorcher.
Cool.